The hour of 7:30 has arrived. I'd like to begin the meeting, this business meeting of District 116 for December 17th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Member Exum? Here. Vice President Hall?
Here.
Member Patton?
Here.
Member Carter is here. President Demmett?
Here. Quorum is present. Paul is at a concert this evening with his kids playing at the middle school, and he'll be here as soon as the concert is over. In terms of tonight's agenda, we have asked to move the commendations and recognitions to the very front of the agenda. It is finals week, and we've got some teachers that need to be recognized, but then need to be able to get home so they can get ready for tomorrow. So we'll move 7.0 to next, if that's okay with everybody. Are there any other additions, corrections, or modifications to this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to our superintendent for commendations.
I am really excited to be able to recognize our National Board certified teachers, newly certified, as well as we have a renewal. This has always been very near and dear to my heart as a former King principal who we took on the challenge of becoming a Take One National Board school several years ago. So I know how intense this process is and how much work these teachers have had to do for the last 2 or 3 years to get through this process. So I am going to call up, I'm going to recognize a couple people. Beth Mears, professional development teacher, leadership coordinator, who works here at Central Office, and Julie Erlinger, instructional coach at UHS, who have both worked with these people really closely the last few years. And I'm going to invite Beth Mears to come up and share some additional information about our people we're recognizing tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for inviting us here tonight. We so appreciate it. As Dr. Ivory Tatum said, I'm Beth Mears. I'm professional development and teacher leadership coordinator for the district, and I, along with Julie Erlinger, we have been facilitating National Board candidate cohorts for these teachers and other teachers in the district for the past several years. You should have 2 handouts that explain the National Board process, and also one handout tells you about the process, the other handout tells you the impact that nationally board certified teachers have on students in their classroom. But just briefly, I just wanted to take a minute to share with you the process, the actual process that these teachers have gone through. It is the most rigorous voluntary professional development that's available to educators, and it is a 2 to 3 year process. It's a process that is created for teachers, it's created by teachers, and it is to compare their skills to an agreed set of national standards for their particular content area. The process consists of an assessment that is based on the content and the age range of the students that these teachers teach. It is also 3 intense classroom-based portfolio components, which consist of videotaping their teaching, collecting examples of student work, examples of assessments, and then thoroughly analyzing all these artifacts through a written commentary where they are showing evidence that they're able to meet the national standards for their certificate area. The one handout that you have states that research shows that students that are taught by board certified teachers can demonstrate evidence of deeper learning than students taught by other teachers. We're fortunate in Urbana to have 20 nationally board certified teachers. We also now have 3 elementary nationally board certified teachers, which is something that we had not had before this year. So I'm a former elementary teacher. I'm so happy to know that we have 3 at the elementary level. A couple of things I have asked teachers in the past, I've asked these teachers if they could sum up the process in a few words, what would they say about it? Rigorous, One teacher had a sentence of, "It's a vehicle to force me to look at my classroom, my teaching, my assessments in the most objective way possible." Teachers have said at times it's frustrating, it's intense, it is the best professional development ever, it's a journey, and to grow as an educator is not easy. I can say personally, all of those new certified teachers back there, and Jill, who renewed, who went through the process again to renew, are amazing. They are hardworking, they are dedicated, and we as a district are so extremely fortunate to have them as teachers in our district. So thank you so much for taking the time to recognize them.
So, yeah, thank you, Beth. So we're going to call them up now. From Leo, Bridget Maloney, first grade teacher. LaDonna Helm. Oh, I'm sorry, Bridget Maloney, second grade teacher. LaDonna Helm, first grade teacher. And Jody Miller, kindergarten from Leo. So these are our 3 elementary people. We're going to stand up again because we have a couple of high school people too. Felicia Tafano is not here tonight. She's not feeling well, but we have, she's an English teacher at high school, so we're going to clap for her now. And then Jill Lagerstam is a second renewal, right, Beth? This is her second time renewal. So Jill Lagerstam, art teacher. Yay!
Jill, that's great.
One more hand for the hard work and effort that these people have put into. And they're going to take a picture. Cameron, they're going to sneak in. All right, thank you.
Okay, returning to our agenda. Next up is citizen statements, and I've looked them over. There are 15 forms that are filled out at this point in time to discuss with us, and it's all about one particular topic, which is the SROs. I just want to predicate that we have a timer this evening that we will be using. You can see it on the screen, and for those that are at the front table speaking, they'll be able to see it on their computer, on the computer that's there in front of you. And we are going to adhere to the time limits very strictly tonight. I also want to make a point that looking at some of the topics as written, that please understand that this board has already approved the resolution for SROs. What is before us tonight is not an approval of the agreement, rather it is an approval, a potential amendment regarding evaluation and uniforms, an amendment that, those are 2 separate amendments, and a possible request for the folks that voted in favor of the resolution to, we have a board member that's going to ask that any of the 4 members that voted for it, if they are willing to reconsider the number of SROs between 1 and 2. So please target your comments to that regard. We've heard a lot of testimony about this. Everyone is entitled to their 5 minutes, but out of consideration, we do notice that people have had a habit of coming in and talking to us and then promptly getting up and leaving and not bothering to find out how we've discussed the matter. So I would hope that you would be cognizant of those discussions before you would make any comments to us, so that we aren't rehashing old information. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Yes.
So at the table, if you, hopefully you stopped and picked up a frequently asked questions about the SRO program. I see there are some new faces in the audience who may not have been here for several of our previous discussions. So just to bring you up to date on some of the things that we've discussed prior to you coming to the table to make your citizen statement, that there's just additional information for newcomers. So that is on the table for you to pick up.
All right, with that, in order to address the board, you need to fill out a goldenrod sheet and hand it to our recording secretary, and anybody can continue to do that. And while that's underway, I do want to recognize Austin Pontius and Aaron Lebonsky for running the cameras for us tonight. Nice to see you again, Aaron. So the folks at home can watch us and keep up with our activities. So we'll start through the list as in the order that they were turned in. So first is Scott Dowds, and on deck will be Richard Adkins.
Good evening. I just wanted to speak real quickly in favor of the 2 SRO option. I do believe that it would be a more effective solution simply because obviously if there were issues to arise at both schools simultaneously, which I realize is probably not overwhelmingly bound to happen, but it could. But also, I had a chance to reach out to the Urbana Police Department, and they were kind enough to respond to me with the information about the training that the SROs would receive. And I believe that having a full-time presence in both schools would allow for the children and the community to better interact with UPD, and would allow the officers to, develop a better rapport and relationship with the students in their schools as opposed to having one officer floating between the two. And I do notice that one of the amendments was about not having a weapon visible. I do believe that's something that should be very heavily considered. I know that I can't speak to, being a police officer personally, but I do know that that would probably present, make it much more comfortable for some of the students that may have some issues surrounding that sort of thing. So I guess I'll just leave it at that and let everybody else get to talking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Atkins, followed by Bryant Serafin, Police Chief.
Thank you, folks. My name is Richard Adkins. I'm a retired Champaign police officer, juvenile officer, DARE officer, and that was the genesis of school resource officers in Champaign. I think there's about 5 officers there now, maybe 6 in Champaign, and I am certainly in favor of school resource officers and what they accomplish in the building and what they represent in the building. I'm very proud of the opportunity to do that. After I retired, I had the privilege of going back to school and receiving a master's in education, becoming an elementary school teacher at 54. So I know a little bit about what school resource officers have to endure and get involved in. Not only do they offer a level of safety and protection for the students, but also the staff. There's a lot of complex family issues that can bleed into the school environment, and people just, my understanding is people just feel safer with a police officer there, someone that has a position of authority. Whether they're in uniform or not, they're police officers, and they're trained police officers, so they know weapon retention, they know how to take care of their weapons. And, a police officer without a weapon is not going to help anybody, be able to help anybody. He's got to call 911 like everybody else. But we do get heavily involved with our students. I am still mentoring a young man from Centennial who I'm happy to say just turned 22 a couple of days ago, and he's engaged to be married. He just proposed to his fiancee and getting ready to leave the community and move away. Just a wonderful young man, but just the ongoing relationships. I felt like I was protecting not just friends, but family there at the schools, friends, children of friends. And then the point that school resource officers have the opportunity, you will never know how many problems that they solve before they ever get into the criminal justice system, before they ever get into the school administrative system. They solve problems by bringing kids together to hash out issues. They communicate with teachers constantly, students constantly. There is a majority of students there that are not getting into trouble, not causing trouble, that want to feel safe in the school. And having a police officer there makes them feel safe and comfortable. And I'm just all for school resource officers. If anyone has any questions further about this, they're welcome to call me and ask me at anything at any time. My phone number's on that sheet I gave you. But God bless you for doing it and supporting school resource officers in your district. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's gonna bless a lot of people, hopefully save some lives. My partner Steve Reynolds and I just happened to be at Jefferson one time and took a loaded gun off a young man over there not too many years back. So it does happen, and it's wonderful that there are police officers there that can handle situations like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Serafin, Chief Brian Serafin, followed by David Guth.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
2 weeks ago, you guys had some discussion about some further material, and I was at Shop with a Cop that night, so I wasn't able to be here. So tonight, I wanted to just take a couple of moments, 4 minutes worth or 5 minutes worth of moments, to sort of maybe expound on a couple of things as we move forward in this joint partnership on this initiative. Before I got into some of that, I just wanted to say there have been a lot of public meetings that I've been a part of lately, and there have been a lot of people who have come up and spoken. And to those folks, I just want to say that this is a good thing, that this allows us as police to help develop our awareness, to kind of reflect and improve upon how we interact with citizens. With regards to agenda item, I think it's 12.2 that details with the reporting and the evaluation. I think that was in section 8 of the IGA. That has been something that we went through together, school staff, after some feedback from the Urbana City Council. And so we believe that is a good thing, and I hope you will, I believe you will as well with regards to that amendment. With regards to reducing from 2 SROs to 1 SRO, the city is not in favor of this action item. We've had quite a bit of discussion, and I've heard the term quadrupling quite often, which is a pretty precise term for what is more generally a rather gross, blunt measurement when we try to determine exactly where does this officer, how do they spend their time, this detective. And when I supervised that unit, including the SRO, I directed that detective to focus their time in the high school. Even in the halftime model, there was not enough time, and I watched a prior SRO just get ground down to a nub to try to be all things to 2,000 students. And it was not fair to that person. And in addition to that, we're changing the model and how we're doing this. And I think that's a huge point here. We've had the detective do it as a half-time, sort of part-time job. We will no longer be trying to do it in a sort of minimalist fashion. It is our goal to have this person embedded and invested in the school staff, and I think you've heard that especially from the administrators and folks who've come forward from the schools. This new model will require effort, time, resources, more than we've done before, and it is the best practice, which I think is in the FAQ sheet that was laid out tonight as well, with regards to trying to get the right number of SROs for the most effective model. That was 12.3. 12.4, the agenda item with regards to uniforms. When we first came to this, we did it back in October 1st, I believe it was, the first time we presented to this body. We had Officer Robinson here, and we showed what we're calling the soft uniform, or that sort of on the continuum of uniforms from the polyester blue that most of the ladies and gentlemen wear to a detective uniform. With the modified uniform, we're hoping to accomplish a couple of things. By softening it, we're hoping that we are maybe a little more approachable than the standard uniform. The full duty belt with all of the accoutrement does allow the officers access to all of their tools. And that's kind of the practical side. They have everything that they need. The relationship side, though, is a piece of this that we've talked about again and again and again. Specifically, there might be those who might be afraid in the beginning, but our hope is that over time, over their middle school, over their high school, they recognize the police officer as a human who happens to have a job and has the job of the police, and that those sort of other tools sort of fade away. And that's my goal, that's my vision for having them in this modified uniform. This is an operational matter that I feel very strongly about. That's why I think during the initial time I was able to say, yes, we can go with this modified. But to go back to the sort of detective model is not something that I am in favor of. I wanted to take then the last minute, or my 33 seconds, to thank you guys for all of your energy and time on this. You've had lots of information. You've had lots of emotion. You've had lots of perspectives that you've had to weigh. And I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate your consideration with this matter.
Thank you. David Guth, followed by Michael Langendorf.
Good evening,
Good evening.
President Dimmitt and members of the board. As you recall, in June of 2018, a broad-based coalition of concerned Urbana parents under the umbrella of the Urbana Parent Advocacy Group submitted a petition with over 200 signatures mandating that you, the Urbana Board of Education, restore order and safety to our schools. In October of 2018, the same group of parents, after further incidents triggering further serious safety concerns, brought an additional petition with an equivalent number of signatures. This reiterated our mandate to the board to restore safety and security to our schools. We thank you for taking these mandates seriously and taking immediate action with some difficult decisions regarding changes to administration and discipline. Tonight, another member will be submitting a similar petition to you, urging you to maintain the current level of student resource officer staffing, one at Urbana Middle School and another officer at Urbana High School. Many of us as parents have expressed these strong mandates to you because our children have been bullied, assaulted, and repeatedly threatened with violence. While I understand that parliamentary procedure allows the board to discuss the possibility to reconsider this vote, we are extremely disappointed in this request. On behalf of my children and many unspoken voices who are afraid to speak publicly, we urge you to maintain your vote in support of adding one SRO to UMS and one SRO to UHS. Thank you again for your leadership and for making these difficult decisions during these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, followed by Susan Roden.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just who I am is I live in Urbana. I've been here for 35 years. My daughter went through K through 12 here and successfully went to college and is a social worker like I am. I'm a retired school social worker. I worked in Vermilion County for 25 years. I started their Safe Schools program, where the kids are wanded when they come in every day. Every one of our kids was wanded. It's important to maintain SROs. My personal opinion after listening to everything is, more importantly, you should hire 5 new social workers for each building, because as a social worker, I think that we're the best intervention for mental health, personally, but that's not going to happen. My experience with police officers has been very positive. They're not the enemy. In Vermilion County, we specifically had one of our deputies was assigned to our building. So he knew when he came in the building that the kids were kids that had been expelled and kids that had problems, and knew how to deal with them and to work with them very closely. And I think your approach right now with the 2 SROs is absolutely important. Each person should have a knowledge of their building. The kids should know who they are. They should be trained. And I think that approach is going to work the best in terms of what's going to work at our schools. And it works both ways. It's security for the kids, it's security for the teachers, and it's security in a lot of ways for our community to see having an officer in each building. And as they're there, we'll get to know, that's not my bill, is it? They'll get to know the students, and they'll understand where they're at. And specifically when you have junior high kids and high school kids, man, junior high kids are just tough. And you need to have someone in that position to do that and deal with the junior high kids, or excuse me, middle school kids, because those guys they're a bunch. I still would suggest 5 social workers more per building. As the legislative chair for the Illinois Association of School Social Workers, I'm totally pro school social work. And as a matter of fact, 2 years ago, we were instrumental in taking the officer out of the refocusing program and mandating that mental health professionals do that now. So we wanted that officer freed up from that responsibility and have mental health professionals doing that, because we have so many mental health problems in our schools. And I know that Urbana will do a great job of training the SROs so that they have that training, understanding of mental health. And you already have good social workers. Actually, 3 of your social workers actually worked with me to get their licenses to be social workers, and they're all working for you now. And I know how hard they work. And I know that it's essential to getting things together over there. So please, 2, at least 2, and 1 in each school is probably the best approach we can do. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Susan Roden, followed by Eric Morrow.
Do I speak in this one? All right, it's my first time doing this, and I'm a little nervous, so I feel like I have cotton in my mouth. But I felt very strongly compelled. Can you guys hear me? I felt compelled to speak tonight. I've been following school happenings for a long time, and I'm a resident of Urbana for about 25 years now. And I've been really active in the schools as a parent and a volunteer. And currently I have 2 kids at the high school. And they're real active in the schools, and they're having a pretty good experience. But last year was really, really harsh for a lot of people, and it was unstable. And I hope that the district never returns to that. I'm fully in support of 2 SROs full-time, 1 in each building. I spoke with both Dr. Berenson and Dr. Wiemelt today. I reached out to them because I'd been listening to them speak, but I had a few clarifying questions that I ran by them, and I feel really satisfied with the information they gave me, that this is the right decision. I also put together my own notes about why personally I'm in support of this. And a lot of what's already been said I agree with, especially about the social workers. I wish we had enough money to do everything that we need for our students and staff, but we have to make hard decisions. So I wanted to tell just a little bit of my own story. I'm supporting this agreement to have two full-time SROs in the district, one at UMS and one at UHS. UMS has approximately 980 students and about 160 staff. That's 1,140 people in that building. UHS has about 1,200 students and 150 staff, so that's another 1,350 people in that building. As we know, the buildings are next to each other, but they're both quite large. And that would be about close to 2,500 people that we're talking about giving, one person oversight for safety. And that seems like a really bad decision. If the main goal of the SRO is to develop relationships with students, then we cannot expect that to be a realistic goal with only one person covering both schools and all those students and staff. A few more numbers. I have a son who's a junior at UHS, and in the 2.5 years that he's been there, he's had 3 principals, 4 guidance counselors. There have been 3 superintendents during that time, during that short period. I don't know the number of staff who have come and gone, but I know that there have been many. Thankfully, my son has had several staff members and teachers who've been consistent during this time, and these relationships and familiar faces are very important to any young person who already has an incredible amount of change and stress in his life. I'm speaking generally right now because, most teenagers have that. But my son has some additional challenges. Going through 4 different guidance counselors was really stressful when he needed to make changes or his schedule was messed up or whatever, like having a new person who had no idea what was in his 504 or what his needs were, caused a lot of unnecessary stress and confusion. And we're really grateful for the staff and the leadership in the district right now. And I hope we can keep things going forward more stable. So all of these things inform my thoughts on the SROs. I'm almost out of time. Let's see. I thought about it a lot, and and speaking with the people involved in the schools, the idea is that SRO is not about punishment. Quite the opposite. We're trying to prevent bad things from happening. And I think an SRO can play an essential role in that. I am in support of critically looking at the documents and making sure we have the best possible agreement. And that it's in support of a good outcome, and that there are, checks and balances, basically, just that we do it right. As other people have said, there's been some good community insight about how to do it in the right way. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Eric Morrow, followed by Charlotte G.
I want to say good evening to the Urbana Board members, Urbana Central Office, and those who are here in attendance tonight. My name is Eric Morrow. I'm currently in my 9th year as an employee of Urbana School District, working at Urbana High School, previously as a dean and currently now as a student interventionist. During that time, I've worked directly or indirectly with the school resource officer, and I must say it has been one of professionalism and mutual respect. In my 20-plus years of working in education, I would say my experiences working with school resource officers has been of great benefit. Though we deal with unfortunate situations that occur which involve the need of a school resource officer from time to time, I've also experienced situations in which students have informed the school resource officer about community situations, helping keeping students safe regarding domestic issues, and have also witnessed them playing pickup games of basketball and other extracurricular activities, and having conversations with students just about life in general. These are a few examples of the things that students have experienced during my career. I also envision a full-time SRO creating opportunities of enrichment and providing environments for the school community to ask questions which may help to dispel myths about law enforcement. This opportunity could also inspire students to consider law enforcement of some type as a viable career and possibly come back to work within the Urbana community. I look at the hiring of full-time SRO at both the middle school and the high school as a benefit to school safety, community relations, and community investment for the future. Lastly, for the various SROs that I've worked with over the years, the one thing that's a common attribute among them all is that they enjoy working with the schools and, most importantly, supporting students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Charlotte G., followed by Jacqueline Hanna.
All right. Hey, is this mic on? Can y'all hear me? Wow. All right. So a lot has been said about this whole idea to introduce police officers. I find the term school resource officer to be a way of sanitizing the image of what a police officer is, right? I find the idea that these introducing police officers to schools and over time it will foster a better relationship with the police or make the students more comfortable is a disingenuous idea. My father was a police officer. My father was a police officer of the Chicago Police Force for 20 years. Okay? I, however, am a transgender woman. That means when I see a police officer, I feel unsafe. I feel like when I feel stared at, I feel uncomfortable, and I feel like if I were to be suspected of something, I would not be given fair treatment. And this is a reality for many, many, many students of Urbana schools. Urbana schools as a district has a very, very significant black student population, a very significant minority student population, a student population that historically has been disproportionately discriminated against at an administrative level. The history of Urbana schools, only a few years ago, there was a disproportionate number of expulsions of minority students. And changes were made to the board in an attempt to adjust this, or not the board, administration, and systems within the schools. But actions were done that made these potential solutions more like half measures, discrediting any potential success they could have. The fact is, a bunch of adults in a room saying like, well, I feel comfortable around police officers isn't going to make people feel more comfortable. I guarantee that if somebody was standing in the corner of that room over there, okay, with a 9mm pistol, a weapon of death, a weapon of war, most of you wouldn't feel comfortable at all. So you are expecting a bunch of 14 to 18-year-old students to feel comfortable with that? I sure as hell wouldn't feel comfortable with that. And this is the reality of it. We're arguing about potential platitudes here, potentially like, oh yeah, they'll get used to, the cops will be their friends. But why is that the solution? Why is the solution the police officer? And I understand that Mr. Dimmitt said that we should keep it on task about the actual resolutions on the menu right here, right? So here's the thing, okay? I know those guns, instead of maybe having the officers, I guess, one, a uniform isn't going to make anyone feel safer. okay? Seeing a uniform just means that person right there is in charge of you. That person right there is a guard, an armed guard watching you, making sure you don't do anything wrong. Additionally, officers shouldn't have guns. If you really are going to have SROs, and if you really are going to entrust them to make students feel safe and students trust them, then they shouldn't have guns at all. That's just the reality of it. I'm not going to be comfortable around someone with a gun, especially if I'm not a cisgender white male student. Like, there are people that can get away with that. There are people that can feel safe around police. But you're disenfranchising an entire population of people by just making a statement that the police are there to make them feel safe. Because they absolutely won't. And I urge you, and I understand this is a bit pedantic and rude in a way, but I urge you to look at yourselves on the board. Look at the makeup of the board right here. Do you really represent the makeup of Urbana schools? So think about that. I rest my case.
Thank you. Jacqueline Hanna, followed by Ellen Max Axelrod.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Hanna. I'm an Urbana resident of 17 years, and my child attended the district schools until recently, which I'll speak more to in a minute. I find it actually really ironic. This is my first time coming up here and discussing this. I've been following this. I've been doing lots of research, trying to understand the situation, and to hear people are afraid to say they're pro having more police in the schools. That's the people who are afraid to talk are the people that are not comfortable with this decision. We're afraid of the effect. There are Urbana school parent groups that I've participated in, because I also was a parent in this district when more and more violence was suddenly breaking out, and there were a lot of parents groups being formed to discuss what should be done, how we're going to keep our kids safe. And those aren't the voices that didn't get space. Those voices that have been pushed more and more out of this whole conversation have not felt comfortable, have not felt safe, are parents of kids who have less social status, whether because of they're disabled, or because of race, because of income, because they don't have the supports they need at home. These are not the voices. You're not missing the voices that are in support of this. And I'm not in support of it, and I'm going to speak to why. And I've heard, let's stay on. So what I'm saying is, please only hire one, since it's not, and I'm going to say, I see those of you who voted against this, and thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for standing up for that, because that is not easy right now, because that is not where the loud public opinion is right now, and I know that. My son was a student at Wiley School, kindergarten through 5th grade. He has an IEP. He's now a 7th grader, but he has never walked in the halls of UMS, and he won't. When he started at Wiley, any parent who's a parent of a child in an IEP, it's not an easy process to get everything your kid needs, but there were people there was a good team, they were on our side ultimately. We were working on how to get the resources he needed with what the school had available, and we were pretty confident in that support, and the school was pretty peaceful. And we watched every year the amount of support available deteriorate. And why I'm bringing this up is this is an ableism issue, by the way. This whole violence question, it's an ableism issue too. Because as we watch that support deteriorate and not be available, and as we watch teachers and speech therapists and social workers and counselors who really cared and were trying to pull together and were not allowed to say certain things and didn't say them, but we're trying to figure out how to pull together what these kids needed, we watched them unravel what they could offer, what they could support year by year. And by the time we got to 3rd grade, we started to see more violence and discipline issues. And by 5th grade, it was a mess in that school. Class counts were up. How many kids were in every class? How many support hours were available? How hard I had to fight for the obvious fact that my child needed those supports. And I was in those schools fighting for that support for my child who had those needs because I can, because I have that privilege. But there were so many kids in his class that needed educational support, that had IEPs, that had plans, and there was no one to make sure they were getting what they needed as the amount of support available, as the amount of support to teachers, the amount of kids in classrooms piled. And behavioral issues went through the roof. And I was worried too. I was really worried. I mean, my son has never, ever, ever been labeled a problem kid. He's super docile. He's always the kid who never got in trouble. But he was, I watched it happen. I watched it happening to his friends. Friends who were not getting the support they needed, who were acting out more, who were making poor decisions because they didn't have the support they needed. We're responsible as a community for this violence, not these children. Supports have been removed for them to make good choices, for them to be able to succeed. And when you are drowning, you make bad choices. But what we do know is I honestly looked for research that supported the idea that putting more police in the schools was going to decrease discipline issues, was going to increase school performance, and I couldn't find it. What I could find was research that repeatedly showed that more social workers, that a higher number of a higher counselor to student ratio would make a difference. That those things, there was documented. And I have not just been a parent in these schools, I have been a mentor, as my husband, to multiple children. So I don't want to hear anyone saying that, oh, well, if people don't show up or don't care until it's this issue. We have been in these schools, we've been trying to help, and I have watched a child who was a sweet child, started mentoring them in grade school level, never major discipline issue, but they have an IEP, and they have attention issues. They have a problem sometimes making good decisions, and they need extra help educationally. And they were a great kid, and they got to UMS. This child's black. And this child, when they're scared and when they don't understand what's going on, get pretty quiet. And I don't know about you, anyone raised an 11-year-old, 12-year-old? She has a little bit of an attitude. Especially when she feels like she's being told she's wrong and she doesn't know how to fix it. So, and you guys threatened to send her to juvie because she couldn't get the support she needed within 6 months. We're responsible for this. Invest in something that actually supports them.
Hi, so you might not know me all that well because most of my activity has been through helping undergraduate student groups deal with police. I've been a police liaison for the Graduate Employees Organization. I've been a police liaison for minority groups who would probably be uncomfortable with me speaking their organization's names to you now. I've watched police officers use very, very simple rhetorical tactics. I'm going to be very friendly, very professional with everybody who's involved where my bread is buttered. But when I'm tasked with protecting the peace, suddenly that professionalism goes out the door. I've had police officers say very unkind things with the intent to gaslight people of color so that they would have the pretense to arrest them. And the only reason that police liaisoning works is because these have been in very public spaces where the press is in. That's not so with a public school. And so we should be much more serious when it comes to the realities of the difference in rhetoric, the difference in cultural presence of a police officer. And I'm saying this from the perspective of there might be nice people involved. Systemic issues, like what we're discussing, are by definition normal. So when people are saying that it is normal to have SROs in school now, that it is normal for people to have even higher staffing of SROs than what we're proposing, that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it informed by data. Doesn't make it informed by research. Earlier speakers included a very nice and well-spoken DARE officer. The DARE program is renowned for one thing: increasing drug use, which was antithetical to its purpose. So we should understand the difference between individuality and systemic issues. We should also take a look at the current presentation of who has been able to speak sooner, there tends to be a slightly more well-groomed, heteronormative appearance of the people who speak sooner, because they are not evil, they are someone who struggles less, does not have the difficulties of an LGBTQ person, does not have the difficulties of a low-income person, of a parent with a child with a disability who can't be here tonight, of a grandmother whose children, she cannot be here to speak on behalf of tonight, her grandchildren. There's a consistency in that. There's also a consistency in some of the rhetorical points, such as, they only show up now. Why don't you stay for the whole thing? This has to do with the fact that not everybody's able to. It's not laziness. Life is hard for a lot of people. And so it behooves, especially representatives, to be understanding of that, accepting of that, because we know that you're the ones who make the decisions. And if you're expressing tone deafness here, well, that's just indicative of all the other decisions you make. That's not good praxis. I'm going to shift over to talking, or reading, rather, remarks from a grandmother who couldn't be here today, and perhaps some other notes. And I don't say this because I believe that this best represents my view. I say this because she couldn't be here. And me reading her statement is the equivalent of her saying something and then walking up out of the room. The public may do what they like, but representatives, not so much. You have to be here. We put you here. SROs are just what they are, officers. We have many cultures in the schools, with parents, teachers, and staff who do not understand the real need here for real mental health counselors in the district who understand the many, many cultures to help with the students, staff, and community. The lip service to social workers is just that if you don't prioritize it. Please vote for one officer and use the funds for the others.
It's Majewski, thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right, my name is Catherine Majewski, and many of my concerns have already been addressed. I am a highly anxious public speaker, so you'll have to pardon me if I babble on a bit. I am also in favor of minimizing the SRO program to the greatest extent possible. I am a bit late to be more emphatic about that because, as Ellen has so clearly pointed out, not all of us necessarily have the ability to be here to show up to every meeting. I am also in favor of more social emotional supports, as has been pretty adequately covered. I think introducing police officers to address these issues of bullying, which, by the way, is, I feel, a highly disproportionate response. It's cutting off the branches. It's not addressing the root causes. It's not. It's not fixing the root cause. It's not helping where the help is needed. I'm sorry. Again, I'm sorry, very anxious public speaker. We need to be prioritizing SEL, social emotional learning for students. We also need to recognize, as has been addressed, people say that police officers make them feel safer. That is absolutely not the case for many communities, as has been repeatedly pointed out. To someone who lives in a community that faces fraught interactions with police officers, to say that having a police officer present in the school is immediately going to ameliorate those reactions and those feelings, I don't feel is a particularly realistic view. Having a police officer present in school with a gun, clearly armed, even if a student doesn't immediately, fear reprisal, it sends a message. The message that's sent to students is this is the expectation that the adults in your life have of you. These are the stereotypes that they hold of you. This is what they expect of you. And this causes significant issues. It leads to stereotype threat. It leads to, higher rates of disillusionment, disengagement. I'm sorry, my anxiety is kicking in pretty severely, and I feel like everyone's addressed what I wanted to address much more eloquently. But prioritize social work, prioritize mental health supports, prioritize building structures of support rather than bringing in outside officers. One more thing I did also want to address, and I'm glad that I actually came back to it, bringing more punitive measures into a district. I'm sure people have seen the recent ProPublica report about isolation for students. There were 99 incidents of it in the 2017-2018 school year, I believe, of which 5% no real reason was documented. To be using these severe punitive measures and then to introduce law enforcement, introduce a potential school to prison pipeline, I feel like that's frankly fairly irresponsible. So, in other words, I support the proposal for fewer SROs and not threatening students with the implied threat of violence, if not the actual usage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Orr, followed by Elders Carr.
Hi. So I'm back. It's good to see you all again. And I think this evening I'm going to try a slightly different angle in our thinking. So I'm hoping it's evident that not only as you navigate this difficult decision for the district, there'll be many more ahead of us, I'm sure, that I don't intend on going anywhere, and that I intend to be here and support, especially for those, as others have said, don't have the privilege to do so. So I was kind of trying to figure out what it is I wanted to say, because I've spent quite a bit of time in front of the microphone, in front of you all, about this issue. And what really struck me is that several times I have been put in the category of the opposition. And what I would really love for you all to consider is that maybe instead of opposition, maybe I am actually your best friend. So what is actually, what is this metaphor I'm trying to make here? Why consider me your best friend? So I will fiercely defend our public school administration in making difficult decisions that are well informed. But I will equally demand accountability and call you out if you're acting flippant or irrational. So my ask has been and will remain rooted in accountability for your words and your actions. I have seen you try to push an IGA with vague and open-ended statements and act surprised when the very people you aim to serve demand better. I have listened to your disbelief at my request for strong and sound language to best protect our most vulnerable students. So I willingly sit here again, and will continue to do so, and call attention to the need to take this seriously as your best friend. Approve these much-needed amendments. Listen to those in the sidelines asking for better. And never forget, our district does not reside in a vacuum. We are not impervious to failed good intentions. We are no unicorn. So pause. You need to acknowledge your power, especially in this proposed IGA. and back up your good intentions with words, with your actions. Make it sound and listen. And this comes to you from your best friend. Thank you.
Elders Carr, followed by Julie Blixen.
Good evening. I'm having passed around a statement that I'm going to read from tonight to the members of the Urbana School District 116 Board of Education and Superintendent Dr. Jennifer Ivory Tatum. We give honor to God, and we are here tonight on behalf of the Minister Alliance of Champaign-Urbana and Vicinity to follow up on concerns regarding the initial proposal and intergovernmental agreement for developing a full-time school resource officer for the Urbana High School and Urbana Middle School. These concerns were expressed on November 5th, 19th, and December 2nd during citizen input for the Urbana School Board and Urbana City Council meetings. The Minister Alliance is also requesting that the previous minutes in November and today's statement be updated to reflect the individual name of the speaker or myself and the group, the Minister Alliance of Champaign-Urbana and Vicinity. First, we acknowledge that the reference to the role of an informal counselor in the original proposed document has been revised to exclude informal counseling for SRO duties, but an SRO may be used as a law-related resource for instruction under the supervision of a certified teacher. The intergovernmental agreement also has been updated to include parental notification in general. However, in Section 7, Standard Operating Procedures, specific language and actions have not been fully developed. These areas include Section 7A5, untoward incident, Section 7, 8, and 6, investigating suspected criminal activity, and other areas where possible confusion could arise during implementation. And those, I don't know if I have time to deal with those, but the last item in Section 7 refers to opting out, as we understand it is possible to do. And we are presenting a sample form attached, asking you to consider making it available to parents. Since you are ultimately responsible for the decision to bring SROs into the schools, we ask if you would share this information with the Chief and Urbana City Council. You and the city both have attorneys and can consult with them as to the appropriate way to include this vital resource for parents. In addition to safety, which is important, you have the responsibility to make sure procedural safeguards are in place to protect the rights of all students, including access to confidential records, clear language, and informed consent for parents to have a say in the decisions that you and school administrators will make on behalf of their children. And then attached form, read that. Important. Parental notification to Urbana School District 116 regarding school resource officer contact with my child. It reads, I am familiar with the standard operating procedures of the School Resource Officer Program. If the SRO wishes to question or interrogate a student regarding a potentially criminal activity or incident at school, the student has the right to inform the SRO he or she wishes not to speak and to remain silent until an attorney, parent, or legal guardian is present. Therefore, as the parent legal guardian of my child, I wish to inform school authorities in advance that I and my child decline any requests from the SRO to be questioned or interrogated regarding any potentially criminal activity or incident being investigated at the school. I request that I be contacted and present before such questioning or interrogation is initiated or occurs by the SRO. I do not grant in loco, quote, and loco parentis, unquote, rights to any school official to attend any SRO questioning or interrogation on my behalf are absent. And there's places for signature of both the parent and the student. In addition, we're sharing a link to a News Gazette article entitled, quote, Champaign School Board okays $75,000 lawsuit settlement, published on September 19, 2015. The article notes a family filed a suit against Unit 4, accusing the school district of violating their son's rights when he was searched for drugs by a school administrator. We know that you have very difficult decisions to make in your role to give every student access to a quality education. If you are acting on behalf of all students, then you must want the best for them as you would your own children. We ask that you make sure procedural safeguards are in place to protect rights of students, and in our role as a community organization, we're also advocating for them to avoid the school to prison pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Blixen, followed by Ben Jocelyn.
Good evening, Board President Dimmitt and the rest of the board members, and Dr. Ivy Tatum, and the rest of Central Office staff. And Laura. Hi. I've spoken before about why I support the school resource officer. I just wanted to add to that a little bit more, in that knowing that a part-time or having a shared officer between the two buildings, I don't see it as a feasible arrangement, in that just to get from one end of our building over to the middle school takes a long time. There's a lot of things that would have to happen and be in place for that to even, I don't know how, I can't envision in my mind how that would work. In the time since I spoke with you last, our officer has been pulled multiple times to go do his detective job, making need for us to have to call the non-emergency number. And every time that we call the non-emergency number, we get different officers who aren't aware of our students, who aren't aware of their situations and their backgrounds. Our school resource officer is aware of those, and he knows our students and is able to address those needs. And so we have a lot of things going on in our community that I think a lot of people don't know about, but the police know about the things that are going on in our community, the things that lead to things that happen at school. They have that history, they have that background. They know our students, and that the students that are involved in these things. And so there are times that we're able to head these things off. And so I just think that having someone split between the two buildings, again, I support having one at each building, especially given all the changes of things that have happened. Back in 1993, when you all had the first school resource officer, I believe, in the area, students didn't have access to guns and ammunition like they do now. Students didn't have access to some of the things that are happening in our community, in our world. And so things are different than they were. And so I think we really need to consider having that school resource officer in our building full-time, because it's something that we need for our students, for our staff, for our children. I think that I can't imagine working in the high school without a school resource officer full-time. It would be a really difficult thing. So thank you.
Ben Jocelyn, followed by Cord Schroeder.
Hello there, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ben Jocelyn. I was born here in town, went to Leal School, am on the board of the Unitarian Universalist Church and the chair of the board of the Channing Murray Foundation, work at the university, and the views expressed are my own. First, I also want to acknowledge those of you who've voted against this measure. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Second, I want to talk about how 2 weeks ago, we came with lots of testimony, people talking about their lives and the impacts that school resource officers have had for them and that the police have had for them, and that discussion was cut short under the pretense that We are not voting on a full proposal, but instead upon a resolution. And it is my understanding that the way that different government bodies work is that when one looks to have an agreement with another and sends it forward, the body they're looking to have an agreement has the choice to accept, reject, amend, or consider at a later date. The Urbana City Council chose to amend it, and it is now a separate and new legal document that you cannot choose to only accept part of. You cannot vote on just an amendment, but instead that you're voting on what is a new legal document that's been sent back to you. And so when that conversation was cut short, I believe that you did a disservice to listening to those people's concerns, of which was one person who was a man speaking about when in 9th grade an SRO told him he could disappear. Another woman talking about her brother who is black and nonverbal and her concerns for his safety. And I want to acknowledge all of the problems that people identify, right? Violence in the schools is rampant and needs to be fixed. I'm not trying to say that that's not true. You're working with too few resources, and I am so grateful that all of you are involved in this and doing that hard work and hard decision making. I'm not trying to say that we don't need to solve this problem, and I'm not trying to say that 2 counselors or 4, for $162,000 a pop or $325,000, I think we can invest that differently. I think there are visionary ways to solve this, and I think that we're not taking them. We can have so much more resource. I'm not trying to pretend that 2 counselors for every cop is going to mean that there's no fights in the halls. And I think that hall monitors and further resources are ways to do that. I know that you've had experiences with other policies, but my suggestion is not that your concerns don't exist, especially talking to the parents who think that I'm up here trying to say that your concern doesn't matter. I think it does, and I think we need to solve it differently. And for the amount of money we're looking to spend, I think that there are visionary ways to do that. When you look at sort of the report that says, why do some people not want SROs in schools? And it says the concern with having some police officers that may set up a school to prison pipeline. And then it goes on to say that some people might feel afraid. We know that some people feel afraid. We know that around the nation, we see that cops in schools don't make schools more safe. That's what the data shows. And when we look at sort of the fact that some people have come and said they feel unsafe, we know that some people are made to feel unsafe, and it is not your job to make more people feel safe. It's your job to make sure that all people feel safe. And if one of your choices is ensuring the fact that some students will feel unsafe, whether it be 5% or 10% or 50% or one population or another population, when you know that it will make some students feel unsafe, how can you move forward? What percentage of the children, how many children is okay to make feel unsafe with a gun? I feel unsafe around a gun. And we know that that's true for at least one student. And we know that it's probably true for certain populations that have been historically underserved. And we know that it will end up, we just look at the national data, and whether or not we like the SRO that's in our schools now, that's not a contract with the SRO that we have now. It's a contract with the police department, which we also haven't responded to the fact that our prison, for the last, since we've been taking data in 2013, I believe, has always been over half full with African-American individuals in a county with 13% African-American individuals. So whether or not their intention is to be racist, and whether or not, I don't mean to speak for anything other than the fact that we know that that police department continues to put more black people away. And we're looking to make an agreement with them without acknowledging that. And so I want us to at least acknowledge the fact that we're making some people feel unsafe, that there are other ways to spend $325,000 and 40 hours of training for any given police officer versus a lifetime for the social workers or other people who've been trained in making kids' lives better. Seems like a woeful way to spend the district's money.
Thank you.
Cord Schroeder, followed by Mitch Berenson.
Good evening. Thank you all for your time. We all are pulled away from our families, and this is a very important issue, and I appreciate all of you guys taking this time out of your lives. For me, I don't understand the idea that, obviously several people have said that police don't make them feel safe. I have a different opinion. Police make me feel safe. I think that's their job in this world. And if that's not the case for some people, how is exposure at a high school and at a junior high a bad thing? To give them exposure to police and get them to see them and be around them and realize that they're people. I don't understand how this can't be a learning environment, which is what a school is, and why they can't learn to work and be coexistent. And for me, I think they need to have their gun, because in the real world, they have their gun. And when you see a police officer in the real world, it's the same person you actually just saw in your high school, in your junior high, that you've grown up with. People that you've been around, that you've seen, that are normal people that do normal day things. And so they're not this foreign enemy. They're not this brute force that's there to assault you or pick you out of a crowd. It's a group that's there to help you. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to intermingle or bring them together. I know that Central has had a very good program with their SRO, who has actually had led PEP groups and high school groups and been heavily involved in several of their organizations. And it's a great way for kids to interact with police officers. So I just don't, for me personally, I'm highly in favor of having two of them. And I strongly support the idea of keeping them and not taking them away, obviously. On a further note, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not the first school to address this. We're not new to this conversation. Every single school in our conference has a high school SRO. Every one of them. In my opinion, there's a culpability issue here in front of all of us, in front of your board. We need to be with the norm. We need to be with what everybody else is doing, because if heaven forbid something bad does happen and we choose not to have the police officer, we really, honestly, I think legally have an issue. If we choose to be the one that doesn't have an SRO, and let's say I have an 8th grader and I have a 6th grader, my children come to this school, and we vote to not have an SRO in that high school full time, and we have the tragedy happens. You bet your tail legally I'm going to come after every one of you. And I mean it. Because I think you're doing a disservice to our kids to protect them, because everybody else does it. And while it doesn't make it right, legally it does make it what is accepted as a common practice to protect our children, which is the other part of what we're doing here. Right? So I think that is a very, very large issue when it comes to this, is who's culpable if we don't have them. All right, and the idea that they're not making people safe is for me, a problem with exposure. If we bring them together and let them work together, it will increase, because many of us know police officers to be good people, right? And there are bad seeds in everything. There are bad teachers, bad everything in the whole world. It doesn't mean that we need to separate those people and just bury our head in the sand and say that they're never going to have to run into each other and we're never going to have to deal with each other. We all deal with police. I've never been arrested. However, I dealt with literally 26 times in the last 12 months I've had a conversation with a police officer. I've never been arrested. Right, I've had to work with them on a very strong hand-in-hand basis. Okay, sorry I'm new to this and I'm not as organized as everybody else. Oh, the last thing I'd like to say, I don't want our school to be a test group. Bluntly speaking, I think we tried that. I don't think it went well. I don't want to be the one that steps out and says that we're going to do this different than everybody else. If we have a second semester like we did last year, I won't bring my kids here. That's the blunt truth. And I'm not alone in that. Lots of parents are in the same boat. If we have a second semester like we did last year, good people will pull their kids out of the school. We don't need to be the test group. Every other school in our conference has an SRO at the high school level full time. I think it's simple and it's common sense. One more second. Oh, lastly, I've spoken to administrators personally. We have put great people in charge to try and that we believe that we can trust. This board has put those people in charge. From my experience from talking to them, they have expressed that they want this SRO. I think they are infinitely more qualified than me to give information on that. I don't have their knowledge and their experience, and I don't have the time to devote to it what they devote to it. to a person, the ones I've spoken to, are strongly in favor of this. We have put those people in there to help us make those decisions. I think we should lay heavily on them, and take whatever they're advising into strong consideration. In fact, it should be what makes our decision. All right, I appreciate all your time. Thank you guys for all of it.
Mitch Berenson, followed by Teresa Sweeney.
Good evening. We often don't value what we have until we don't have it. I'd like to add to what Ms. Blixen had said. There were a couple incidents in the last 4 weeks or so where our SRO was not available for a variety of reasons. Our SRO is actually a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday time slot, and then Mondays and Fridays we have people who fill in. But obviously situations happen when they happen. And there were a couple of situations recently where we did not have an SRO. And it was a really difficult situation, a difficult time in our building. Really hard to service the students, because what the SRO would have brought was stability, a way to handle a situation. Now, we were able to do it, but having that SRO there, in fact, somebody even said, is this something our SRO would have been involved with? And I said, yeah, absolutely, it would have. It would have made all the difference in the world. So we value what we have, and sometimes we don't value until we don't have it. And I can tell you, as a principal of that high school, it's a valuable piece to our team. There was a couple weeks ago, my phone was buzzing on a Saturday morning. A situation had evolved in our community. Our SRO had actually been the one texting me. Back and forth throughout the morning, going in and out, worrying about a situation that literally we were talking about potentially having a police presence at our building that Monday morning, a very large presence. However, our SRO often operates in the shadows, like a lot of our SIs do. People don't know what they do because you don't hear about it. They take care of it and they resolve the issues. And our SRO that Saturday morning resolved an issue without an arrest, without any interrogation, got to the bottom of the situation, and there was not a single thing that happened that Monday morning. Nobody knows about that. Nobody will ever know about that, what happened. But because of the relationship the school had with the SRO, we were able to take care of a potentially threatening matter to our school literally that weekend, and nobody ever knew about it. So when I ask you, I put my foot forward to saying this: please support us to do our jobs. We need 2 SROs. They are both dedicated, committed people to each building, and we need them. They're part of our team. And I just ask you to please consider that as you go forward. Thank you.
Teresa Sweeney, followed by Jared Lofrano, sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to keep this pretty short. I am a parent, I'm an educator, I'm a community member. I'm going to keep it short because I've spoken many times on this issue. Many people are aware of my role as an educator and that I've been an educator over 20 years, and I support the SRO. I'm going to be an educator now, so for a minute I would like anyone in the room who raise your hand if you can finish this for me. Gladly would we learn. Just raise your hand if you can finish it. Okay, thank you. So if you can't finish that, you should probably spend a little more time in our schools, because that's Urbana's motto. So to the board, gladly would we learn and gladly would we teach. So that's all about teaching and learning. In order for students to learn, in order for teachers to teach, our buildings need to be safe, our staff needs to be supported. And so I believe that the primary mandate of the board is to make sure that our students are educated, that our students learn. One of the side mandates for the board is that you have to make sure that you're being careful with our taxpayers' money. But our primary role is that we're making sure that students are learning and that teachers are teaching. I do have a copy of the petition. This is the most recent petition. One of my friends is going to talk about the previous petition that was signed a few years ago. But this one is up to over 135 signatures. I have one for many people on the board, and on the back is the breakdown of the data of who signed the petition. So it's UMS parents, it's elementary parents, it's high school parents, and also community members, staff members, and former students. Thank you.
Jared Lafrano, followed by Linda Miner.
Good evening. My name is Jared Lafrano. I'm an Urbana resident and parent of a UMS 6th grader. I apologize if some of this is a little bit repetitive. I was a little late to the meeting because I was at the Urbana Middle School Concert Orchestra and Band Concert. By the way, my hat is off to our fine arts staff. They do an incredible job, and our very talented musicians that we have there. I also wear another hat. I too am an educator, not in Urbana, but in other places, for 19 years. And like a lot of your Urbana educators, I spent a good chunk of that 19 years without an SRO. I taught for 14 of my 19 years in education in a school very similar to Urbana, almost identical in demographics. For the first 10 of that 14, we didn't have an SRO. And it was not a great situation. Violent incidents happened frequently. Violent incidences and other circumstances required frequent visits by our law enforcement officers to the school. We went through some really rough years. In 2010, that school decided to enact a full-time SRO, which ended up being a very good decision. This individual worked with staff to be proactive to address school situations. While instances still occurred, they were much less frequent, much less severe, because they were there. That's why I firmly believe that situations like what happened last spring at the high school would be much less likely to happen with a full-time SRO in each building. But again, I can't underscore this point enough that many have made this evening. The most important thing SROs do is being there with their students. I acknowledge I come from a background that doesn't have a negative relationship with law enforcement. My most negative relationship with law enforcement is a traffic ticket or two that I took exception to. But there are those that do, and I understand that. And that's why every SRO, and I have had the privilege of working with 3 very good SROs in my career, they know what their number one job is, and that is relationship building, just like teachers. They're teachers too. They work to break down those barriers with young people that they know are there to build positive relationships. The SROs I have worked with don't want to arrest students. That's why they're there, to make sure they don't have to. They want to be proactive, to get in their lives, to help them to alleviate those problems. They take it personally if something does happen. Whether it be playing basketball with students before school, starting food pantries, which my school district just enacted at the leadership of our SRO, they're building those effective relationships that make the school a better and safer place by being proactive, building those relationships, seeing things ahead of time that make things better. I don't want to repeat a lot of things that our very talented Urbana staff have said already, so I believe at that I will cut myself off, other than saying I very strongly am in favor of a full-time SRO at both the middle school and the high school.
Linda Miner, followed by Alicia Truzais.
Good evening. You've heard a couple of, excuse me, I have a throat lozenge because I have a cough in my mouth, so I apologize. We've heard mention of a petition that circulated last fall. In September of 2018, a group of Urbana parents and teachers met for a several-hour workshop and shared our stories together and made a statement to this board in September of 2018. And I will read that now for those community members present and our new administration that we have that was not here then. Members of the board, we, the members of Urbana Schools Parent Advocacy Group, comprised of parents and teachers representing all schools across the district, do hereby state: we believe that the working conditions of our staff are the learning conditions of our students. Students deserve a safe environment conducive to learning, and teachers deserve a safe environment free from fear and intimidation. We find the working conditions to be unacceptable and are contributing to an unsafe spaces that are counterproductive to learning. We demand that the Board of Education move immediately to restore safety in Urbana schools. Failure to take immediate action beyond what is currently in place to improve safety within our schools is effectively condoning and permitting a dangerous and hostile environment for students and staff. That was September of 2018. I know I've said that 3 times now. This has been a long time coming. Just last week, we had a situation happen in the UHS parking lot with an 18-year-old who I've been told was a recent UHS grad with a pellet gun, and I know the media is not reporting it as a pellet gun, but I read the police report, and the police report is reporting it as a pellet gun. They were looking for their victim in the high school parking lot. This is a perfect example of how an SRO could have helped keep students safe. The middle school, who had an SRO on duty, went on soft lockdown during that event, and the high school, who did not have an SRO on duty, dismissed students directly into the situation. Let's just think about that. To think about both the middle school and the high school being dismissed at the same time into a situation like this that could have turned out a lot worse. We need an SRO in each school. We have children bringing guns into our schools. We have to make sure that we are making clear-headed decisions regarding what we need for student safety. We can't let issues from people's experiences cloud our decision-making in supporting the SRO. And I just want to mention one thing after listening to everybody's comments. To the person or persons who was discriminated against, to the person who experienced traumas, I want to say I'm sorry. I and my child have had previous experiences that align with some of those experiences mentioned by many here today. Again, I say I'm sorry, and my hope is that we can all work on our triggers and learn to trust and be a community. Thank you.
Alicia?
Good evening. Again, I'm Alicia Trezise. I'm one of your school social workers at the high school. And I'm also one of the leadership of our Urbana Education Association. So in the last year and a half, I've had the privilege and the duty to come to deal and support our teachers at all developmental levels. So first, my thoughts about the SRO. I have to say that it has been my privilege to work with 4 amazing officers from the Urbana Police Department, and I don't work with them very often. And there's a lot of stuff that I have come to rely on them for, a lot of families that we have worked with together that I can't really share due to confidentiality for those families, but I can say that the topics that behind the scenes they have supported me with are helping students who are having a severe mental health crisis, a suicidal ideation, just sitting with me and supporting students who are grieving the loss of one of their peers through a death by suicide, helping me protect students who have been sexually assaulted. And I'm sorry. So I guess, to stop myself from being too emotional, I'm in support of having an SRO in our building, but I think we need to be very, very careful in oversight, because I'm also very sensitive to the students and the families of those students in our community who have some trust issues with the police, and rightfully so. So I think we have to be very, very careful with what we're doing. It's a very complicated issue. I want to implore you, as you look and we move forward with this, and you analyze and you agonize over how to spend our resources, though, I am so happy to hear from all the different viewpoints in this room, and the one common theme I've heard is support of more mental health in our district. And I can tell you right now that that's the resources, where the resources need to be spent next, or in addition to. And I highly advise you, encourage you, beg you to spend some more time, especially in our grade schools, and talk to teachers and talk to the support staff and find out what their ideas are, what their needs are, where the danger is. About a month ago, I came here and told you that, mental health, we are mental health right now, and there's not enough of us, and there's certainly not enough resources open to our families in need in the community. I don't know what it is about coming to a board meeting on a Tuesday, but I ended my day with another mental health crisis. And it was kind of scary, because the call I made to access an emergency mental health assessment didn't get to the emergency mental health assessor, and I had a family and a student in crisis, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and I had to call and talk to supervisors. And finally, by the end of the day, I started this process at 1 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, I had some services in place, and that student and their parent are safe, and we had a plan. Maybe it's just serendipity to remind me that I needed to come and speak again about this. So please, come and ask us questions. Come and shadow us. Get in those grade schools, because that's where I feel like we need to rebuild our foundation of social emotional support and mental health support for all of our students. Because if we can build that foundation there and reinforce at the grade schools, as they develop and go through their own developmental issues through middle school and high school, they'll have a solid foundation. And right now, it's not our fault. It's all of it's commute, but it's our responsibility to address the increasing mental health needs of our students and our families. So, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the board this evening? If so, you need to fill out a goldenrod sheet. Sage is filling his out. If there's anyone else that wishes to address the board, please fill out a goldenrod sheet. Go ahead.
Okay. So I understand that you passed this proposal last Tuesday. And so that happened, and that's acknowledged. And I also, I'd like to thank you who voted against it, first of all. I'd like to remind you that you have control over who enters your building. You don't have to let the police into your school as a physical presence, even if you're paying for them. And also reminding you that searches that occur on school property require the authorization of school personnel, and that, given that you act in loco parentis, meaning that you are the legal guardian of the students during that time period, the responsibility falls on you to judge what searches are and are not okay. And if you're not able to have a form of, I don't know, do you have a form of, I guess you can't answer my question right now, but later, it's important to have a formal policy as to what searches are okay and what searches aren't okay. And if you don't have such a policy, or if the decision rests on over like everyday administrators who are probably have a million things, and they'll just say, okay, do the search. And so, and if you can't have if there isn't a formal policy yet, then your policy should be no searches, which is a policy that you can have, and that would protect the Fourth Amendment rights of your students to the greatest extent. So that's the first part of what I'm talking about. And then the second thing that I'd like to remind you is that your students have a 14th Amendment right to life, and that the gun being on the person of a cop in your school shows intent to end a life, given that a supposedly out of control incident occurs. And that intent is not okay, and it does not fall in line with your responsibilities as an agency of the state. The school is an agency of the state, and it has the responsibility to not deny citizens of life, liberty, or property without due process. It's in the 14th. And so I urge you to think about that when you are drafting your plans for what the SROs are to carry. And my last point is that it's very important to have a wide variety of people who go to these meetings, and the people who are speaking tonight are the people who know about this and have time to come out, and the 3 students who spoke don't represent the whole student population, and that is your first priority, and teachers are the next priority. I also support more social workers and more mental health, because that is a way to solve the things that you see, which are behavior problems, without making students feel unsafe at school. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank you for your service to be on the school board. I know it takes a lot of time away from your families, so thank you. My daughter graduated from Urbana High School, went to Urbana Middle School, and I had no intentions of coming to this mic. But sometimes you have to stand up when you hear things that are totally going against the will of a real solid community. I have heard conversations and comments in this room that are very disturbing to me and really breaks my heart. Because when my daughter was in Urbana High School, she had an IEP, and I had to go and advocate for her. But also, I was in social service for 20 years. And I went to a lot of these schools advocating for other children who find themselves in situations that they don't want to be in. So when we come to this table with our privileges and we talk about these families as if they're beneath everyone, it saddens me. Because school is a place where we should be trying to lift people up, not tear them down. Yes, we do need maybe some type of SRO. But what about the social workers, the deans, and the people that interact with these families who are in crisis. I don't think that any of us can ever understand how these children come to school hungry. They have maybe seen police in different situations that are not always the best. And we're talking about that in our community where the police is not always at its finest, that we're supposed to expect these young people to look up and say, oh, it's great. It doesn't matter what they have on. They are still policemen. And our kids are not able to distinguish whether this is a good one or a bad one. And so when people who speak for just their children come into this room, it is unfortunate because we should be speaking for all children. Whether they are underserved, whose socioeconomic is not able to have parents that can just come because they have cars, there are a lot of barriers why people do not participate. And unfortunately, they want to, but they can't. We need to be looking at how do we lift the overall curriculum in the school so everyone is being served. And it is not with a police officer, but it is with someone who is trained to look at these children and see what their issues are in their homes and get them to the right place where they can really be helped. Some of these kids are fighting within their own homes to survive. So when they come to school, yes, they're in anger, they're in a fighting mode because that's all they know. So I would suggest that we can do a two-pronged approach. Not just talk about SRs or O's like they're going to solve every problem that everybody has, because they're not. Maybe they might solve your problem because you want to know that a policeman's up there, and it's going to be the children who of a color will be the first ones that they will approach. So maybe that makes you feel good. But what about those kids who are struggling every day just to get there? So I would say that we need to really look at how do we service everyone so that those children are not left just to be kids who are going to be identified as problem children. It is all of our responsibility to make this world a better place within our community. How do we do it? By reaching out to the least of them.
Anyone else wish to address the board this evening? Anyone else wish to address the board?
Just a point of order, Mr. Chairman. Could we have better control over the microphone? Some persons have a louder voice, and seems like I have a hearing issue, and maybe others do too, but there could be better control over the volume somehow.
Well, that's what our technicians over there at the cabinet kind of work with.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Anyone else wish to address the board? Hearing none, we'll move on. The first item on tonight's agenda is a public hearing on the estimated tax levy. I have this gavel at this particular time, so I open up the public hearing to discuss our estimated tax levy. If there's anyone that wishes to address the board during this public hearing, now is your opportunity. Seeing none, close the public hearing. We have no communications this evening, other than what we have been handed and been talked about. Administrative reports. Brian is healthy this week, so we're ready to have the Yankee Ridge School Improvement Plan.
Good evening. Brian Anderson, principal of Yankee Ridge. I'm happy to be here this evening. I apologize that I was absent 2 weeks ago. I was under the weather, but doing much better now. So hopefully you received a copy of the Yankee Ridge, Illinois Empower School Improvement Plan. As you know by now, Yankee Ridge rose from underperforming, which was our status last school year, to commendable this year. So although it was a planning year for us last year, due to the hard work of our teaching staff and our support staff and our students, we've already reached the commendable status, and it is our goal to maintain that status and continue to improve. So our Illinois Empower team at the school came together in October. We started by reviewing our Illinois Quality Framework, which we had rated ourselves on in May of 2019, and when we came together in October, we looked to see if we had made any areas of growth. That's how the process began for our team at Yankee Ridge. And then from there, it led into very natural conversations about where we needed support and how we could apply the funding to most benefit our students. And the result of those conversations you'll see in the packet that you have in front of you. We established 2 goals. Our first SMART goal is a literacy goal. It is that all students in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade will increase reading proficiency by 5 points from September 2019, which was at 49% at that time, to May of 2020, and we hope to end the year at 54% for all students reading composite scores. That would put 54% of the students would be at or above grade level. We will continue then to set a goal for the following year and 2 years from now, and increase by 5% at each year. I'm happy to report that we've already shown improvement. We recently had our data day today, actually, and we have another one on Thursday. A data day is when we sit down with our literacy interventionist and our school psychologist. We talk to the teachers and we look at the results of the Ames Web benchmarking assessment. And while I said we were at 49% in September, we're already up to 52.25% this winter. We saw some incredible growth in 2nd grade and 3rd grade. 2nd grade went from 40 to 44%, and 3rd grade increased from 44% to 50%. So they are largely responsible for our movement as a whole group of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Our plan specifically centers around our district practices. There's not too much that's new in here. We have a really powerful literacy plan in our collaborative framework, which I brought a copy of this today, and I'm proud to say that our Yankee Ridge teachers do an excellent job with instruction. I'm very, very proud of their literacy instruction specifically. They all have guided reading groups that are set to the students' instructional levels, and they meet with the students regularly, and we have strong interventionists. We have 3 interventionists this year that are supporting over 70 students. Our students receive that double dose of instruction. Those that are struggling receive the double dose of instruction, and those that are at grade level or above grade level have a variety of challenging activities as well. So in the discussion we had when we were planning on how to utilize the funding and maximize the benefit of the funding, a natural conversation occurred, kind of an organic conversation about what literacy tools are out there for teachers. And our instructional coach, Paige Wagner, has worked quite a bit with a handful of teachers that have used the Lucy Calkins reading and writing units of study. So one of the teachers on the group actually mentioned this and said that she wanted to apply the units of study in her own classroom and had heard good things about it from other teachers in the building. And so with that, we looked into the cost, and we have decided to utilize some of the funding to purchase the Lucy Calkins reading and writing materials. These materials are very good at helping teachers manage the overwhelming task at times of systematically teaching all the literacy elements, such as predicting, inferring, summarizing character, theme, plot. It can be a little overwhelming when you have a group of 20 students and you know that you have this much curriculum to cover. You're not quite sure how to tackle it. You have multiple small groups that you're teaching throughout the day. The Lucy Calkins materials allow us to have that framework. So that's where we're putting a lot of our time and energy. And we're investing in those materials and investing in some professional development in January, coming up here in a few weeks, or I guess a month. Our second goal is on improving attendance. So we met with Kathleen Weber, who is our district partner at ISBE, and she emphasized not only the strategic value of having a goal towards attendance, but just the common sense value of the more students are in attendance, the better off they do. That's at Yankee Ridge and at other schools, but we have a lot of data that shows that the longer students stay with us at Yankee Ridge, both in terms of their attendance throughout the year and from year to year, the more successful they are. So we have an attendance goal as well. We're aiming to reduce our chronic absentee rate down to 22% at the end of the year, and then it will decrease by 2% the following 2 years as well. Aspects that, or our plans for achieving this goal include highlighting attendance through positive awards and just highlighting the awareness of the importance of attendance, having improvement plans, connecting with families, and having our student engagement advocate reach out to families. She's already reached out to a number of families and had conversations both in regards to attendance and in other ways that we can support and develop a stronger relationship between the school and the families. And then also utilizing the conscious discipline program that our staff was trained in back in August. So these goals within our school improvement, or Illinois Empower School Improvement Plan, align with the other goals that we have in place. I want to acknowledge that we do have a writing goal as well that's in our other additional school improvement plan, and we have a social emotional goal. But per the requirements of ISBE, we realized that we needed to specifically identify how we're utilizing the funding, and also we realized that we had a deficit and that we hadn't addressed our attendance, high level of attendance, the chronic absenteeism. So that's why we developed these plans. I'm happy to entertain questions if you have any.
Any questions for Brian?
Are you at 22% now, or is that where you're trying to get to?
We are at, we're at 24%, trying to get to 22. Let me double check that. Yes, we're at 24, trying to get to 22.
Any other questions for Brian?
I just wanted to follow up on that because I actually had a question about the chronic absenteeism. I know it's a terrible concern.
Sure.
And I know you talked about tying in the school nurse to inform parents about when their child is too ill to return.
Sure.
Helping parents understand when a child is or is not too ill to return. Is it your understanding that that is partially what's contributing to high chronic absenteeism rates at Yankee Ridge? Is that kids are staying home because parents maybe falsely believe they're too ill to return?
Sure. No, let me clarify. I said Student Engagement Advocate, or SEA. I apologize if I didn't enunciate. So we're utilizing our Student Engagement Advocate.
Okay.
There are certainly some cases where students are ill. They come down with something unfortunate and keep them out of school. That happens every year, and I think that is a portion of our higher chronic absenteeism. But I also think sometimes things such as the education piece on a snowy day that we had on yesterday, that was, our attendance was a little bit lower, and the district got the word out that we had school. But people come from all different parts of the country here in Urbana, and I think some see snow and they think, oh, we're going to keep our kids home. So that's a factor as well. And our families are hard-working families. Sometimes it's an issue of the bus or getting up on time or making sure there's somebody that can get the children going. So that's where our student engagement advocate can contact the parents and help problem solve and troubleshoot right there in the moment, via the face-to-face meeting or a phone call about what can we do, what would help.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
In a sense, someone can educate me on this. I mean, is it true that a certain number of tardies is equivalent to an absence, right? So I was always wondering, at Yankee Ridge, you're finding that there's students who are just chronically tardy, it becomes an absence, or are these students who just really aren't there all day long?
I might need some clarity on that. I don't believe the tardies count as chronic absenteeism.
They do it at the secondary level.
Okay. We do have a large number as well as of chronic tardy students. You know, the good news is there that the students do arrive at school, but if they arrive even 15 minutes late, we get to instruction right after breakfast, so it does affect some students. Specifically, there was two conversations that came up in our day-to-day today about teachers expressing concern with one student had, I think, 27 tardies, and the other had close to 68, I believe it. And I was pleased to say the student engagement advocate had already been working with the student that has 68 absences, and immediately I sent her an email saying, reach out to this family as well for the one that had the 20 tardies.
All right, I think we almost need to do without the HVAC. It's too noisy.
Yeah, it's plenty warm.
I'm having difficulty hearing, and
Yeah,
I'm
and it's
in
plenty
the
warm,
front.
really, we don't need any more,
So,
whatever.
any other questions for Brian?
I did want to ask, what is the social emotional goal? I know it's not a part of ISB, but.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. So we want to reduce our office discipline referrals because we want our students to self-manage their emotions, to work through challenging times, and the result will be a reduction in office discipline referrals. And we had a sub-goal of reducing our risk ratio disparity. So 4 years ago, our risk ratio disparity for our black students was 3.33, which is incredibly high. I'm so pleased to say that this year, currently, it's down to 1.46. Ideally, it would be 0. The next goal would be that it would be right at 1, which would mean an equal number of office discipline referrals for the proportion of students you have of any race. So it's down to 1.46.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In changing the order of the agenda around, I failed to ask for an emotion to approve the agenda this evening. So if someone would make that motion in a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. We're now can go through official action items. With that, we're ready for the consent agenda. And on this evening's consent agenda are the minutes of the November 19th business meeting, the December 3rd study session. We have bills and checks. Education fund bills in the amount of $901,000. Operations and maintenance fund bills in the amount of $123,000. Bond and interest fund bills in the amount of $265. Transportation fund bills in the amount of $278,000. Working cash bonds in the amount of $53,000. Tort in the amount of $108,000. Life safety levy in the amount of $47,000. Payroll, $4.5 million. And Urbana adult education in $124,000. We have various personnel items, none of which are too remarkable this evening. We do have an administrative personnel item that is undergoing further review. And that's it for our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Vice President Hall?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. President Dimmitt?
Yes.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Member Exum? I apologize.
Motion is carried. We have individual action items this evening. 12.1 is gifts. Area-wide Technologies of Champaign donated $500 to the UHS boys basketball program. Michael and Jane Kane of Urbana donated $100 to the district in memory of Kermit Harden. A group of Leal friends who wish to remain anonymous donated $500 to the Leal Trust account. Mary Jane Tuttle of Champaign donated $100 to the high school orchestra. Jennifer Livingston donated a percussion kit, rolling bag with set bells and snare drum with stick bag and sticks worth about $450 to the Urbana Middle School. She's from Mahomet. Urbana Middle School band received a total of $200 from Sanjay and Amin Patel and Sandy Vogt. Joy George of Champaign donated 22 backpacks filled with school supplies valued at about $500 to the Urbana Middle School social workers. And Kiwanis of Champaign-Urbana donated $800 worth of books to the students at Urbana Early Childhood School. A motion to accept and send thank you notes would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. 12.2 this evening is approval of amended language in intergovernmental agreement, Section 8, SRO. This is the amendment that the city of Urbana placed on the agreement and sent back to us for our review and approval. It was discussed last time. Is there a motion?
Move we accept the agreement as amended from the city council.
Second?
Moved and seconded. I believe the motion should be approve the amendment. To approve the amendment. Is that all right with the seconder as well?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
fine with that.
So before us is the amendment regarding formal program evaluation. Discussion? Are we prepared for a vote? This would result in spending money, so I believe a roll call would be in order.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Vice President Hall?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. President Dimmitt?
Yes. Motion's carried. 12.3 is a request to reconsider the intergovernmental agreement, and the topic is 1 full-time SRO versus 2 full-time SROs. This is on our agenda tonight as at the request of Peggy, so I'll turn it over to Peggy.
Okay, thank you, John. Since we're still finalizing the SRO agreement with the city, I wanted to provide one more opportunity for the board to reconsider the proposal to hire 2 full-time SROs. We know that small class sizes and small case sizes enable our teachers, counselors, and social workers to more effectively connect with students, and must acknowledge that committing $320,000 annually for 2.5 years to pay for 2 full-time SROs will certainly limit the funds available for teachers, counselors, and social workers who are in fact responsible for creating safe and effective learning environments for our students and staff. Employing 1 full-time SRO dedicated to our secondary campuses is a reasonable compromise at this time. If the state provides funds through a school safety grant, as Brenda discussed with us at the December 3rd board meeting, we can always scale up the number of SROs in the future if warranted. But quadrupling the number of SROs from our past practice is an overreaction to the events of last year, and I believe is an irresponsible use of our district's limited personnel funds. In order for my request for reconsideration to move forward, I would need one of the 4 board members who supported the proposal, and that would be John, Brenda, Paul, or Tori, to make a motion to reconsider. Making the motion does not commit you to change your vote. It simply offers an opportunity for the board to consider the large investment of district funds required in hiring 2 full-time SROs. So is one of you willing to support the request for reconsideration?
I don't see anyone wishing to consider the request for reconsideration. So I believe we move on to the next item.
All right.
The next item is 12.4, request to amend the intergovernmental agreement regarding uniforms and having to do with the gun being visibly displayed. Peggy?
Because a visibly displayed gun negatively affects school climate and relationship building and sends the message that those with guns wield the power, which is an attitude we're trying to combat in this community. And because for many of the past 26 years, our SROs did not openly display their gun, I offer the following proposed change to the intergovernmental agreement. And it's my understanding I don't need another to make this proposal.
No, you can't.
So I offer the following proposed change to the existing agreement. Under Section 4H uniforms, I propose we require that an SRO's gun not be visibly displayed. So the proposed new language in Section 4H would follow. When serving as an SRO, SROs will wear a UPD-approved police uniform at all times or other apparel approved by UPD without a gun visibly displayed.
And believe that's in the form of a motion.
That's in the form of a motion.
Is there a second to the motion, or do we want to discuss it? We can have discussion if people would prefer to have discussion. Let's discuss. Who would like to start?
Can we invite, if the chief is still here?
I think it's, the chief's back there, and so.
Would you join
Ms.
us at the front table?
But first, before the chief speaks, is there any board member that wishes to speak?
I feel like it should be visible. We need to respect the police. They know how to use a gun, and it would be easily accessible if there was a need for them to use it. I think our students need to respect the officers and the uniform. They need to understand what their job is and why they're there. So I'm in favor of keeping it visible myself.
Anyone wish to speak before the chief speaks? We'll have an opportunity after the chief speaks as well.
And you don't have to speak, I mean.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I brought
I
them
thought-
forward in case there were specific
there
was-
questions.
case
I
there was
thought
a
I was
question.
more of a
Okay.
Q&A guy. I think
Yeah,
I addressed
sorry.
it during the
You did,
citizen statement.
But I
Okay.
wanted him to be close in case you had specific questions about their practice or their union or any of those things.
All right. Anyone else wish to offer anything?
At the risk of lengthening the meeting, though, could you just clarify again if it's absolutely required that it's visible and what detriment it would have to have it be concealed?
So, when officers try to wear concealed, like for instance, at all of these meetings, I've had a gun, and it has been concealed. I think the biggest issue that I have with regards to the concealing of all of the equipment is the lack of the ability to identify that person. Like I said, when I discussed this with other chiefs, they said, no, you need to have all fully uniformed. And so I believe that there shouldn't be any confusion about who they are, or is that a substitute biology teacher? People, citizens, students, parents, staff need to know exactly who that person is. So yes, I think there's an identification issue. I also believe then there's that practical side with regards to what the tools that they have available. And they have more of their tools available, God forbid, if they have that full duty belt and it is available to them on their waist immediately.
So the section is pretty nebulous, though. It just says UPD approved police uniform. And I remember when Officer Robinson came in and she had the soft uniform, it was, I mean, if you have wording or logos or things that says Urbana Police on it that's quite visible, couldn't that also serve the purpose of letting a student know who that person is without having to see a weapon? I mean, if it was written on the back or if it was in a prominent
Sure.
logo on the front?
That would assist, yes.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up what Ann said, when, a couple months ago, when I had conversations with faculty, longtime faculty, and students who had been at the high school for a number of years, about the open display of a gun, most of them, the faculty in particular, because they'd been there for 15, 20 years, remembered most of those years the gun was not openly displayed. You know, the SROs wore like a polo shirt over, and the gun had to be worn, because as you mentioned, that's non-negotiable. But in their memory, most of that time, the gun was not openly displayed. And I said, did that ever lead to confusion about who was the SRO? And they said, well, no, never, because there was, I mean, they couldn't remember exactly, but there was some identifying material on the back or on the front. And in each case, the students and the faculty said, we never had trouble knowing who the SRO was, but it certainly just improved the climate, not having it right open. It was there, I mean, everyone knew that they had a gun, but it just wasn't on display. I mean, they couldn't remember exactly how many, but it was certainly the standard practice for much time in Urbana.
And I would, I guess, disagree perhaps with some of their recollections. I'm not going to say that they never did, and I won't get, I know that there's quarter zips that guys wear now, and they sometimes blouse and untuck-it shirts and a variety of different things. But it is my preference that they have their equipment that they need to do their job most effectively.
And sir, just to be clear, I'm not saying, I understand they would absolutely have all their equipment.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, is there a need to have it openly displayed? Does that somehow inhibit their ability to do their job if in fact it diffuses some tension and improves the climate in the school?
Well, and I'm not, I won't go into whether or not how much of diffusing of tension and improving climate, whether or not there's some sort of shroud, and I am not a expert in all styles of holsters and whatnot. I will tell you, however, that I think that this is for me an extremely important issue.
Okay. I guess
So-
yeah.
Chief, so I've been around since the SRO program started at Urbana, which means I've been around too long. But many would say. I do remember that many of the SROs wore a shoulder harness where the gun was up, if you will, under the arm, I guess, and not down on the belt. I've tried to give this a lot of thought too. So what, your reaction to my statement?
Very few shoulder rigs are sort of what you're referring to, and Starsky and Hutch and things.
Yeah.
Very, very few officers that I'm aware of use those much anymore. I don't know if they've fallen out of favor, but you don't see many of those styles. Again, and I guess I will say, since I went into investigations in 1999, so I guess for the last 20 years, it's been predominantly an open carry style of wear for the part-time SRO.
So I've walked through the high school a couple of times this fall as this has come up, and not with any aim, but just if I ran into Darren, I wanted to say hi. I haven't run into him yet, being there. But I've talked to a lot of students who are not even realizing that Darren's there, which I guess means that Darren's doing a pretty darn good job of fitting in and not creating a threatening environment. But does Darren wear his weapon on the belt?
Yes.
And it's been that way since last February.
Yes. Well.
Since he started.
When he started, yes.
March or whenever it was that we started this. Have there been any negative repercussions that you have been aware of or that have been brought to the attention of the Police Review Board or to any citizen complaints about the presence of an officer with a gun in our schools for the last almost 9 months now?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Other questions of the chief, other discussion? Can what? Mitch, sure. Mitch? The question is, are you aware of any student complaints about Darren McCartney and the gun being worn?
I have not received one complaint.
Any other high school staff person here tonight heard a complaint?
What about community input on this issue?
No.
When would that be possible?
It was earlier tonight.
So we didn't know if the chief was going to insist on his position to carry an open carry weapon.
Yes, he stated that during his presentation when he spoke to the audience under citizen participation. I'm sorry, I can't recognize, I'm sorry. We have to deal with the people that are at the table.
We have to say, I mean,
We are done with citizen input. I'm sorry.
What about
Oh, same thing.
We've had student input over the last month or so, several times.
I mean, I have to
All
say,
right.
not getting a complaint doesn't mean that people are comfortable with it. I mean, I appreciate knowing that people haven't made complaints, but that's quite different from whether or not it's a necessary aspect of our SRO program. And it seems to me a small compromise to make if it makes some number of students uncomfortable and it doesn't impede a police officer's ability to do his or her job. And in fact, for many years, that was the case. And we at least have had anecdotal evidence that it doesn't interfere with people knowing who the SRO is. Why the insistence of having it openly displayed? I mean, except for that you feel strongly about it, I can't understand the insistence on it being openly displayed, except to kind of exert some message that maybe, that I feel we want to combat.
Yeah. And again, I believe it has to do with access. There are other styles or ways that someone could carry. There's ankle holsters, and there's a variety of different things. None of them are as fast as how they routinely train, which is in that duty belt out of that duty holster. So that's what they traditionally carry. That's why all the policemen throughout, at least Champaign, the patrol officers, that's where they carry. So I guess there's a component of access to this. God forbid that an incident were to occur where they would need it. So I guess that's my best answer with regards to what your comment just now.
But in the 27 years that we've had SROs, have the SROs ever pulled their gun in our school?
I do not know the answer to that.
I don't think so. I think we've asked that question before, and I don't think that has ever happened. So to have something on display and to send such a strong message when it, and I understand it might make some seconds of difference, but when you're not called upon to pull a gun, hopefully at all, I mean, it certainly hasn't been past practice, it seems like we're sending a strong message that doesn't need to be sent, and I really question why we need to do that. If we're really trying to establish relationships between an SRO and students, as we've heard from many people, and I've heard from others outside of this room, it interferes with that relationship building. And for others for whom it doesn't make a difference, I don't think it would matter to them if it wasn't displayed. I don't think it would hurt their relationship if that gun wasn't sitting right there. But again, I have a hard time accepting that it's the insistence that it needs to be openly displayed.
I feel like it's a tool that they need, just like how we prepare our teachers with computers or, in the olden days, chalk to write on the chalkboard, things like that. I feel like that is part of a police officer's uniform, and it's a tool, and they should be respected at all times. And they earn that respect by forming bonds with the students and the staff. And we've already heard about some of the bonds that they have formed already with our social emotional specialists and the social workers at our schools. And personally, I feel like this is just another part of their uniform. Just like when you get up every day, you put socks on. I feel like a gun is another part of their uniform that they need to have in case they would ever have to use it. But they respect it. I think people should respect the officers. And that's just my opinion.
Other board members wish to speak.
I guess just my last statement is that we did have strong relationships formed with the SROs over the years without an open display of guns. So I don't think that's necessary to develop the relationship. And I think absolutely they should be respected, but not because they have an openly displayed gun. I think they should absolutely be respected, just as our teachers and counselors and other professionals should be respected.
Right, that's what I was saying, but I feel like it's just part of their job, part of their duties and everything. You don't earn respect by going around and presenting yourself like you're better than someone else. You earn respect by communication with other people. But to me, I just see it as part of their uniform. They get up every day, they put on that uniform, they put on their holster. It's just part of their job.
So can I ask, I know we're talking about Darren right now because he's our most recent, but Matt Bain, I know he's talked at city council, Tim McNaught, previous SROs that have been really highly well thought of. Have they all carried, visibly displayed their
Yes,
weapons?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think the situation changed radically last year, Jennifer. I mean, there was sort of the time period before February 2018, and then the period after.
Well, no, I guess I was asking, I mean, Tim McNaught dates back to many, many years.
Tim is I believe, the longest serving SRO, yes.
Sure, and he carried, his gun was visibly displayed when he, I guess that's what I'm saying. For years, Matt did, Tim did, Darren now does.
Well, it must not have been consistent, because I've gotten different reports from teachers who worked with them. So maybe it wasn't 100%, because they didn't think it was visibly displayed.
I've seen Officer not on the
his
side
gun.
in our buildings. I mean, that was several years ago.
And Matt
Okay,
Bain did as well.
So maybe it was inconsistent, because I've certainly had faculty who said, no, that wasn't the case. So maybe it wasn't all the time. Understood.
I was trying to recall, I think current Chief Cobb, when he was our SRO, I believe I'm remembering correctly.
Could be.
That he wore a shoulder with a sport coat. But Anthony was a pretty imposing figure, whether he had a uniform on or not. Okay. I've thought this thing through. I'm moving towards vote. Sounds like we're moving
I'm ready
towards
to
a
vote.
vote.
Is there a
Need
second?
a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
I wasn't moving directly, moved and seconded. I wasn't moving directly to the vote. I was moving towards some explanation of my thinking. I believe that I attempted to frame my thinking around what I was then later told was old thinking, that the Urbana student body is much different today than it was 20 years ago, and that while if I could go back to those days where our conversation centered around high expectations of all children, that was what this board spent an enormous amount of time in the 80s and 90s, was always making sure that we had high expectations of children and students, older students that are no longer children, they're young people. That would cause me to be against having a full, hard uniform police officer in our schools. And I was carefully reminded by the folks in our school that people that have spoken here tonight say that we need to put more money into that type of work, which is the mental health staff. We have put $1.2 million in the last year into mental health staff in this district, into social work / mental health / student protection type people, and then I think that we move towards the soft uniform, and many of the social workers have already presented to us, student interventionists, social workers, the other acronyms, have presented to us that without the presence of an SRO, a full, publicly recognized SRO, like other school districts have, that they would be hampered in their ability to do their job. And for that reason, I intend to vote against the amendment and to leave the agreement in the form that it's in. Moved and seconded. I would remind everyone that if anyone else wishes to speak, they can do so now. I want to remind everybody that before us, the motion before us is to amend the agreement to be more specific about the presence of the gun. That's the nature of the amendment. The amendment is that we would be more specific about, please repeat it, Peggy.
When serving as an SRO, SROs will wear a UPD-approved police uniform at all times or other apparel approved by a UPD without a gun visibly displayed.
So the agreement is to add the language without a gun being visibly displayed.
Correct.
So that's the motion before us. Is the board ready to vote?
Yep.
Roll call.
Member Exum.
No.
Member Pulaski.
No.
Vice President Hall.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Carter votes no. President Demmett.
No. Motion fails. We are now ready for the next item on the agenda, which is 12.5, resolution regarding the estimated amount necessary to be levied for year 2019. We had a public hearing about this earlier, and we had discussions about this earlier. Carol, anything that needs to be added? Is there a motion from the floor?
Move acceptance of, 12.5.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Exum.
Yes.
Member Pulaski.
Yes.
Vice President Hall.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. President Demmett.
Yes. Motion's carried. Approval of a property tax relief grant. Is there a motion? This was also discussed, wasn't it? I'm sorry.
No, actually, we didn't.
No, this
talk
is
about
something we
one.
I guess
did
I
last
just
year for
read
the
so much
first
about
time.
it.
It's a long shot. We're like number 163 on the list of Illinois school districts as potentially being able to be funded, but we're going to give it a shot and apply anyway, but more than likely, we're not going to get it. But if we do, the amount of the grant that we would get would be used to abate our taxes, so it benefits the taxpayers of Urbana. So we want to go ahead and try for it.
Do you happen to know how far down the list they got last year?
They got to number 40. They funded 40
Oh.
districts last year, and we're number 163 on the list this year. So most likely, we will not get touched, but we're not going to let that prevent us from applying, so.
I move to approve, unless we're still talking about it.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. 12.7, lease agreement termination. Carol.
Yes, this is the first step in a process. We are trying to get a new agreement with Promise Healthcare, who now is running our school-based health center. And in that process, we realized that the lease that we've had since 2004 still involved public health and community health, CHIC, Community Health Investment Center, Improvement Center. So the first step was to get that lease terminated so that we can get a new agreement in place. So it took us a year to get to this point. We've been working on getting all the parties to sign this agreement for the last year. So I wanted to hurry up and get this on so then we can move to the next step, which would be getting a new agreement with the current operators of the health center. So that'll be coming next.
Move acceptance of the lease termination?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I specifically asked questions about this. I wanted to make sure that this was in no way step one towards closing our school-based health center, and I was assured that it is not. It's simply a matter of properly identifying the new tenant.
Yeah, quite the opposite.
So we'll be bringing a new lease and a new agreement back probably in January.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I hope that they don't take any of the furnishings, since all of those were donated by local entities to us.
They've been, I think, CHIC has been out for some time.
A while, over a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. We have no call for any future special or executive meetings at this point in time. We're ready for superintendent's report.
Okay, so we have some celebrations here. Lori's going to get us all queued up. Our Urbana Middle School girls have had quite a run to the states this year. They beat Jefferson in the regionals, and then they defeated Mattoon to win the sectional championship. This is a picture of them at sectionals. They did go all the way down into their conference to the semifinals for state. They did lose that game, but it was a great run, and we're super excited for the 8th grade girls basketball team. So congrats to them. Yeah. We'll have to invite them back. I know Dr. Wemel, I don't do Facebook, but I know on Facebook he has some great photos of the plaques. So we'll have to invite the girls back at one of our award commendation areas and let them show off all their hardware. So for both of those regional and sectional championships. So we'll do that after the break. Raven Russell, this is a senior at Urbana High School. I went to her signing yesterday, so this is Raven with her. Her sister is a sophomore. Raven signed to play volleyball next season. She's going on a scholarship to Southeastern Community College. Raven is a really gifted athlete. She will, when she graduates, she will graduate as a 12-time letter woman, I guess, which is, she plays 3 sports, basketball, volleyball, and softball, and she's played all 4 years, and most of those years all on varsity. So it's highly unusual for us to have a 12-letter athlete at the high school, and we're super proud of Raven. And she did all this as well as being recognized by IHSA for several academic achievements as well. So kudos to Raven Russell.
Yes, way to go, Raven.
2019 CHOP Challenge. I know Mr. Williams, Cameron, is he still back there? Did a great story. I hope you followed it. Champaign-Urbana Schools Foundation, Monday, December 9th, hosted the 4th annual CHOP Challenge. Students from the high school culinary arts class and Edison Middle School students interested in foods and culinary arts competed in the kitchen at the high school. If you've not been in that room, I'd encourage you to go visit. It is a great experience. This is one of the collaborative grants through CUSF, and they've been doing this since 2016. So it's a great experience for the students. They actually bring items from the Fowler Farm initiative too to create the dishes that they use, and so it is kind of a farm to table experience as well. I believe Cameron was one of the winning dishes from Urbana High School. What was it, the Sunnyside team? I can't remember. I don't think we put that on here. So the young man standing there was part of the winning team, Cameron. So there were judges. They spent, a nice, good 50-minute cooking activity, and so it was a great experience for our youth at Urbana High School. So the CHOP Challenge. And next, we've had 3 Teachers of the Week in the for the News Gazette in the last couple of weeks. Yes. So on the left there is Diana Friedman. She's a 2nd grade teacher at Wiley. She was announced as Teacher of the Week December 5th. Darcy Silver in the middle there is a literacy interventionist at Leo. She was recognized on November 29th. And Noelle Hatcher on the right, 3rd grade teacher at Dr. King Elementary, recognized on November 21st. So those are our most recent Teachers of the Week. And last but not least, I hate to say this, but we're all really ready and looking forward to winter break. I think the staff and the students as well. So December 20th through the January 3rd, we will have our winter break happening here soon. Central office, just to note, will be open December 23rd, 26th, 27th, 30th, January 2nd and 3rd. And then the dates that will be closed, we're closed on the 24th and 25th, and then New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And then we also have some FOIAs. I lost my FOIA list. Oh, thank you. Dr. Robert Kramer, variety of employee salary benefit reimbursement information, curriculum information, current superintendent contract, locker room, and athletic information. I believe this was not just a USD FOIA. This was a FOIA that districts all over the state received from Dr. Kramer. WCIA, Paul Cicchini, all documents, electronic and written communication related to 2019 Urbana School District Holiday Party. holiday parties, including but not limited to emails, letters, memos, proposals, invoices, bills, receipts, and text messages. Allison O'Dwyer amended to include all written communications, emails, text, documents in reference to the School Resource Officer Intergovernmental Agreement between the City of Urbana and USD 116 from January 1 through today, which that was some point in November. I can't remember the day. And those have all been satisfied.
Board reports?
The middle school concert was awesome tonight. Thanks for letting me go.
Yay.
Any other board report this evening?
They also, just to kudos to the middle school teacher and the high school teacher, last week they had a joint strings concert between the 8th graders and our chamber orchestra. And I just want to say I'm really thrilled that they got to collaborate because the 8th grade strings kids were just phenomenal. And so I'm really excited that a lot of them, I hope they all move to the high school because they're doing great things. At least, so yeah, and congratulations to all of them.
Hearing no other board reports, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved?
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. We're adjourned.